As far as the business goes, it's, to me, instead of studying the past of business, it's about reinventing and pushing business into the future. I remember, thinking like, why is marketing, when I would study marketing, and I was like, God, it's so blatantly marketing. There's got to be a more organic way to do this. Like, how do I just push something out to the world and say, okay, this on its own, it lives all on its own. Here's a video lesson. It's front to end. I'm not pushing anything. But if you like it more, or if you like it and you want more, then I'm going to let you ask for more. And then I can direct you somewhere. But it's not that crap where somebody has like, here's a lesson and I'm going to fade it out at 90 seconds and then say, for the rest of the video, visit my website. I never wanted to be that car salesman. I never wanted to be the sham wow guy trying to like have $19.99 flash at the screen at you. I just always wanted to be as organic as possible. What I've learned is that today in, I don't know my months, but whatever month it is in 2017, I just know that the biggest commodity in business is trust.
Hi, I'm Chris Brewer, and you're listening to Meinl Radio. Today our guest is Meinl Cymbals artist Mike Johnston. Mike is best known for being the world's leading online drum educator. His website, Mike'sLessons.com, has helped to teach thousands of drummers worldwide, and just like its namesake, is known for being incredibly helpful, informative, friendly, and cutting edge. The educational content on Mike'sLessons.com and the way in which it's presented to its students is some of the most efficient and effective means of progressing on the drums that's currently out there on the good old interwebs today. Mike has toured the world performing at international drum festivals and hosting drum clinics and drum camps. He even has an annual drum camp he hosts at a castle in Ireland. But Mike wasn't always the main man in the online drum education world. In fact, until Mike decided to start his online teaching practice, there wasn't even such a thing as online drum education. At least, not in the sense that we now know it. Before the Mike Johnston of today, there was a Mike Johnston that was a band guy. He played in a band called Simon Says that was part of the Northern California aggro metal scene. But throughout all of that, Mike loved to teach. So when he wound down his time in band world, he began teaching again full-time, and that eventually led to Mike'sLessons.com. The story of the early days of Mike'sLessons.com has been told many times, so we won't waste your time telling it again. But in a full circle kind of way, it's interesting that we recorded this podcast when we brought Mike to Nashville to film video content for Meinl. Content that focused almost exclusively on Mike playing the tracks he had recently recorded with a new band called Man on the Moon. So while we had plenty to chat with Mike about regarding Mike's current life as an online drum educator, we did it through the pretext of having him here to film performance content to music of his band. Hey everybody, thanks for listening in. I'm Chris Brewer from Meinl Cymbals. We are here with one of my favorite dudes of all time.
Wow.
Mike Johnston.
It's high praise.
Many of you know Mike Johnston from Mike'sLessons.com. It is the online source for education in the drumming world. As far as education goes, Mike Johnston has led the pack, and with good reason. If you ever get online, going to Mike'sLessons.com, spend some time there, you'll get a good feel for why Mike is killing it and leading the charge. So today, with Mike, instead of having some kind of theme for this podcast where I cover one thing in particular, two things in particular, I decided to go for straight up just random questions. Are you cool with that, Mike?
Q&A. I love it. I do need to apologize to our listeners for my voice. It's a little Sam Elliott. I'm getting over a cold. So we could also tape a Chevy commercial while we're here.
Well, let's dive right in. Everybody cool with that?
Let's do it.
So, Mike, you've often said you're a teacher first. Yet, here we are today in the studio where we've been filming content of you playing the tracks you recorded with a new band called Man on the Moon. Since you let go of being in a band way back when you were in another band, to focus on your education career, how often has the yearning to play with other musicians come up, and how have you scratched that itch?
It's a great question. I would say that the desire to go back out on the road has been absolutely zero since the day I quit. I knew early on in touring that touring wasn't for me. So I toured almost nonstop for 6 years, but within the first 6 months, I already knew it wasn't for me. Just lifestyle-wise, how long you're away from your instrument. You know, when you guys go see a concert, for the listeners out there, you see this band play and you just can only picture the drummer on his or her drum set. But what you don't see is that if we were an opening band, that 30 minutes is the only time that drummer's even been on that drum set. When I was touring, I didn't even sound check because I was always doing radio interviews to promote the next show. So I don't miss the touring at all. But what I did notice and what got me into forming a new band was that my drumming didn't have a home. I was developing my drum skills and creating this new style of drumming, but I didn't know where to put it. And I noticed that my drumming was losing musical responsibilities. And as an educator, that's a scary thing. I want to be able to teach a student something, whether it be simple or complex, and tell them exactly what the musical purpose for it is. And I was losing touch of that because it had been so long since I played with a band. So that's why I ended up reaching out to Dino and Q and forming Man on the Moon.
Wow, that's really interesting. I like what you said about needing. How did you phrase it when you said
I needed a home, an environment for my drumming? I was in drum clinic land, so I was always developing my drum skills to that crazy level of drum clinic world, but there was no musical home for me to put this stuff in. So I was getting to the point that I was questioning my own drumming, like, is this stuff musical or is it just cool for Instagram? You know, is it cool in 30-second chunks but has no purpose in the real world? So forming a group where I formed the group with the intent of having a home for my drumming. So I played the way that I play. I played for my guitar player that way and said, could you come up with something for this? And that's how we started to write this stuff. It's very democratic now, and we all write together. But originally, it was around drum parts that I was coming up with because I was wondering, can there be music written to this kind of stuff that I really enjoy playing by myself, but I don't know if it works with music.
How long have you guys been a band?
About 5 months now. It's very new. And unfortunately, we only get to rehearse once a week, and that's usually about 40 minutes of rehearsal and 2 hours of us watching YouTube videos together and cracking each other up. I think that's what I love so much about the band is that I honestly have a blast with them. We actually are calling our EP Moore's Law. Do you know what Moore's Law is? Where it's one of the founders of Intel came up with this long time ago when transistors were just getting started, and it's the law that technology will essentially double in power and reduce by half in size every 2 years. We called the EP Moore's Law because every time we get together, we have twice as much fun in half the amount of time. And I know that we're on our honeymoon phase. For all you band guys out there, they're like, you don't even know what's coming. Trust me, I was in a band for 10 years. I know what's coming, but we're in our honeymoon phase and we are having so much fun together. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Another question for you. You've rubbed elbows at events such as drum festivals with plenty of famous drummers who've had careers as performers and recording musicians. Has there ever been a thing on their part where they aren't sure who you are or how you got there and why you're so well known within the drum world? Or if they did know all about you, did they still give you that kind of questioning vibe? Has it ever provided for any sort of awkward moments?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's provided for too many awkward moments as much as it's provided for a good Aaron Rodgers chip on the shoulder from Brett Favre type stuff. You know what I mean? Like Tom Brady drafted in the 6th round type stuff. So it doesn't happen anymore, but it definitely did. I would say the cover of Modern Drummer changed everything. That was when everyone just kind of loosened the criticism and said, okay, fine, you're here to stay. You're a legitimate educator, even though you've chosen to do it in a different way. But in the beginning, yeah, the first couple festivals I played, you know, I mean, it's, you know what festivals are like. It's the greatest drummers in the world. And they're like, okay, first of all, who are you and why are you on 4th instead of 1st, you know, playing for 5 minutes? And I would say, oh, I have a website called Mike'sLessons.com. They're like, yeah, that's neat. But what do you do? And I'm like, oh, no, that's all I do. And yeah, no one was ever rude to me. They were just confused. And no one took online drumming and online drum education serious at the time. We didn't have Instagram at the time. We had just come out of the MySpace era and just started moving into the YouTube thing. Yeah, there was just confusion. Definitely criticism in the world of social media, like message boards. I mean, that was like violent criticism. And I remember one time I was with Benny Greb, and we were at my studio in Folsom, and he was doing a camp at my studio. This is 7 years ago now. And I showed him this message board that was just ripping me to pieces. And he's like, oh, man, that's nothing. Check out. And then he loaded his message board that was ripping him up. He's like, oh, and look at this one. They're tearing up Steve Gadd. And I was like, okay, so it happens to everyone, and eventually they just move on. So that definitely happened early on. Now it's been fine. I think the one thing that has changed is all of a sudden you have some older professional drummers that maybe didn't know what I did originally, but now they know what I do, and they see that, like, they see maybe their time on the road is coming to an end and they're looking for a new source of income. And now they're coming to me and saying, hey, could you help me build my website? Could you give me some pointers on what cameras to buy? And I'm always down to help people with that stuff because I think it's great.
Perfect segue into my next question.
Okay.
So you have these guys, these drummers that you've admired and respected, and now in a way, at least in drum festival world and all of that, they're your peers. But I've seen it myself. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to call it out. I've seen some people out there that have gone a little bit far.
Right.
So my question is, how does it feel to see another educator blatantly mimic what you do?
It depends. I mean, I think it's something that I try not to talk about too much normally because I don't want to come off as, like, I guess, not even appreciating the fact that I'm influencing something. So, and I definitely don't want to be a crybaby about it. But sometimes when it comes down to, like, the color of your walls, and I'm like, man, you took the swatch into Home Depot and said, I need this for my walls. It's kind of a weird feeling, I guess, because there's definitely a part of it where you feel, like, super proud and like, oh my gosh, this started as something that was going on out of the spare bedroom of my house that everyone in the drum industry at the time said, this will not work. You know, I wasn't a Meinl artist at the time when I started this, and one of the things that moved me over to Meinl was I remember Norbert stopped me at PASIC. I didn't know much about Meinl. I didn't know much about Norbert or you or anything, and he stopped me and he handed me his card and he said, I just want you to know we get what you do. If you ever want to talk, let me know. And that was, and it definitely wasn't poaching or anything. It was very, like, subtle. He was just kind of saying, like, look, I don't know if the rest of the industry gets what you're trying to do, but we do. And that was like, oh my gosh, you know, and then it kind of went from there. But yeah, I think now we're at a place where everything is so open with social media. You kind of know, I let my students and my fans fight those battles for me. When I see it, if I see somebody copy me, like, to the point that I put out a video yesterday and then today they're teaching it to redo what I did, I usually just block those people because I don't trust myself. You know, you get that 2 a.m. muscle thumbs, and you start typing away, and I'm like, I don't want to, nothing good comes out of that. So I just kind of figure, okay, everyone else is seeing what I'm seeing. They'll handle it for me. And I just, you know, leave it alone. So, but in the early days, I wasn't so, I gotta, did I ever tell you that Roy Burns called me after I responded to somebody once? So if you guys out there don't know, Roy Burns is really the man who put his hand on my shoulder and told me that I should become an educator while I was touring. He also is responsible for starting drum clinics, and he happens to be the president of Aquarian Drumheads. Well, one day I got ripped up on social media or on a message board, and I responded, and I went full not good, full blue.
I think I saw this one.
Yeah, and Roy reached out right away, and he said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to write an apology, and it's going to be sincere. And then you're going to post it, and then you're never going to visit that website again. Or you're not going to be on Aquarian Drumhead's roster because we do things a different way and we handle things with class. And he wasn't rude. He was being a father. And I was like, okay. And that's the last time I've ever responded to criticism responded in kind. So.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if that's his lasting impression on me, I'll take it, man. I mean, he has caused me to backspace more responses than anyone else in the world. Every time I write something, then I just look at it, and then I go, backspace it all the way to 0, and I'm like, either don't respond or block them. But, you know, it never makes it better.
If we're going to talk about Roy, just for a second,
yeah.
I think that anybody listening to this podcast needs to know this. So in the 80s, in Modern Drummer, Roy wrote a series of articles called Concepts.
Yeah.
And it was a one-pager, and it was all about a different concept every month. And it always had to do with your attitude or the way you carried yourself. If you showed up on time,
right.
What you ate in order to fuel your performance. Maybe he didn't talk about eating. But.
Sure. No, yeah, I know what you mean.
So Yeah, it all got compiled into a book later on called Concepts that Modern Drummer published. You probably could find this online. My point is, anybody that's listening needs to know, search out, just Google Roy Burns Concepts, Modern Drummer articles. Try to find these and read them. Anything he spoke about then will easily apply now.
Absolutely.
And these articles helped shape a lot of my outlook about how I handled myself as a musician.
And a human, how you handle yourself as a musician then translates to how you behave as a human. And that's, everything that I've learned about being a good person and a positive role model for other people came from another musician. It was me maybe talking trash about somebody and then an older musician stepping up and saying like, hey, you don't know the full story. You don't know if that kid has had drum lessons or didn't have drum lessons or has had supportive family. Maybe he doesn't even have a drum set at his house. So until you know the full story, let's not jump to the smack talk. And that stuff it's funny when the social media world treats me as like the positive guy. I'm like, oh man, I'm so glad we didn't have social media when I was the opposite. Who I am now is a result of changing my outlook and trying to be less judgmental and learn the full story before I make any judgment.
And if you have dark moments, which we all do, I definitely do, the best option is just to walk away from your keyboard.
Don't tweet.
Walk away from your phone.
I've wondered I don't know how athletes are even allowed, with millions of followers, how they're allowed to post their own tweets. It's like that should have to go through a moderator and then that person can agree to post it, because like I said, you get those 2 a.m. muscles and you think like, okay, I'm going to light you up. And then in the morning, you're like, why would I do that? It only fuels the fire. That's so silly. And we talked about it earlier, but why let that one bad comment permeate into the 200 kind comments where everybody was like, oh, it sounded great. You're one of my favorite drummers. And then one guy is like, but why does your snare sound like crap? And you're like, okay, pal, let me talk to you about crap. He said, where's your snare collection? And it's like, oh God, why are we here now? So
you talk about drumming all day, every day. Have you ever burned out from it? How long did that burnout last? And how did you recover from the burnout?
That's a really good question. So I started when I was 5. And I'm 40 now, so it's been 35 years of solid drumming. I've never quit drumming, ever. There was times where it was more important and less important. I would say I wouldn't have considered myself a drummer until I was about 20. So probably the first 15 years of drumming, I just thought I was a guy that played drums, but I never considered myself a drummer. One, I just wasn't very good. I practiced so hard. I was putting in 5 to 6 hours a day, every day, private lessons. I was in, jazz band in the morning, jazz band in the morning, concert band in the afternoon, wind ensemble in the later day, and then at the end of the day I was in marching band. So I was giving it my all. I just wasn't very good. But then around 20, when I got my record deal, I just kind of thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to give it everything I have. So to answer your question, I've never really burned out, but I think the reason I've never burned out is because I've always felt behind. Like I'm always trying to catch up to what my peers are doing. Nothing has ever come naturally to me on this instrument. Like right now, if you took me into the studio room and tried to show me a groove, you'd probably be shocked at like how long it would take me to figure it out. I'd have to write it out. I'd have to play it one note at a time at 30 BPM. And I'd inch it up until it finally got to 60 BPM. Then I would sleep on it. And then I'd attack it in the morning. And then I'd turn it into a solo. It would take me forever. But I know that when I was done with it, I could teach it to anyone in the world. So that's kind of my process. I learn until I can teach it. So yeah, I've never gotten burnt out. I've gotten burnt out on different aspects of drumming. Like maybe I'm sick of doing shows. Maybe, when I was teaching private lessons at 80, I had about 85 students per week. It was like, man, I miss playing shows. So, but yeah, I've never gotten burnt out on the drums.
That's great. So from that, I need to ask, will you teach drums until you die? Or is there something that comes next for you?
I will teach until I die, that's for sure. And I do think it'll be the drums. I've definitely had dreams of teaching something like astronomy or astrophysics, but teaching it in a very different way because there's a lot of aspects, something like astrophysics combines so many other topics that I'm honestly not interested in. There's just these little, I'm very picky when it comes to astronomy and astrophysics. Like I really like this aspect, but not the next one over. Where with drums, it's such a metaphor for life that I think I just enjoy private drum lessons and drum camps where I get to really know people. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I can pretty much nail down everything about a person's personality within the first 4 bars of seeing them play drums. I know if they're a timid individual. I know if they have a sense of humor. I know how they handle failure. I mean, as soon as they hit the first rim on accident, watching their facial muscles, I'll know, like, okay, that's how you handle failure. That's how you handle embarrassment in your life, not just on this instrument. So, yeah, my goal would be to be like, okay, take a look at number 3 on page 26. And then I'm just dead. I feel bad for that student that's in the room with me. It's like, dang, Mike J died on my watch. But that would be heaven for me. Just teaching a drum lesson and game over.
So along your journey for teaching with Mike'sLessons.com, what's been your lowest low and what's been your highest high?
I think the lowest low would probably be the way that social media was, and really it was just YouTube at the time because Facebook hadn't really taken off, and we were in between MySpace and Facebook. So I'm talking maybe 2007, 2008. I think the lowest low was just how people were realizing that they could say anything in the world on social media with no responsibility, because at the time YouTube, you could get an account with no picture, no real name. You were just, Mapex drummer 42, but I took that stuff to heart, and seeing just like the evil things that happen on there, I was like, my goodness, like all I did was teach a fill and you want me dead? This is crazy. I'm like, that's such a far leap. I thought maybe at some point you'd be like, not really my cup of tea. And it's like, okay, I missed the mark on that one. But to be like, hey, just so you know, the world would be better if you died. I'm like, So I remember, it took me a while to realize, to build up the skin that allowed me to just read those and be like, cool, that's blatantly negative, delete. I remember getting called out all the time in the beginning of social media that people would say, hey, I wrote a comment and you deleted it. And I would say, yeah, first of all, you cussed. And I have a lot of young students that are going to read these comments. And it was negative with no purpose. It wasn't constructive at all. I love constructive criticism. Every improvement I've made in my YouTube era has been through constructive criticism. Somebody saying, hey, your face is overexposed because your camera's ISO is up too high. Like, rad. Thank you for telling me. At least now I can fix it. But the kind of, if we start off at you suck, it's like, okay, we really don't need to go anywhere. So I would delete those comments and then block those people. So I would say that was the lowest of the low. But honestly, as a business for Mike'sLessons.com, it's grown since day one. It's never gone backwards. Sometimes it's growing slower because maybe like summer is a good time where you would think my business would explode, but I'm teaching 10 drum camps in a row. So I can't really give my business the attention it normally deserves. So I actually build my business during the winter. So it may slow down the growth, but it's always growing. So each day is awesome. As far as a high, I would say it's probably not a moment. I think 2016, maybe 2015, it got Drum Magazine's like Website of the Year. So we've had accolades and stuff. Those don't really mean anything to me because I don't even know where, those votes are almost like popularity contests. Whoever has the most followers can do that. I think really for me, the highest of the high was just having professional drummers take my website seriously, and just meeting guys that I've always idolized, guys that I've stood in line at NAMM to get their autograph and have them say, hey man, you're really changing the face of education. I'd love to talk to you at some point about doing something similar. It's like, what? Dude, I have your autograph on my wall. Like, okay, I didn't know we'd reached that point where it's actually been taken seriously. So that's probably the highest of the high.
So how much time do you spend thinking about the art of drumming? And how much time do you spend thinking about the art of business?
The business one would probably tip the scales more than the drumming.
I imagine at this point in your career, it probably does.
Yeah, and drumming for me is my escape from reality. So there's, the version of me that's teaching online drum lessons, and it's live, and we're streaming it live. And it's definitely not edited because it's live, but it's me putting on like, okay, kick it up a notch. We're live, we're teaching, and this is fun. Then there's the edited version of me that would be on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and that's, very controlled. And then there's me as just a dude that walks into a room and sees a kit and I just want to sit down and play some freaking Genesis, man. I just want to put on Faith No More and hit the hell out of everything. And that's where the drums really fit in my life right now. They're my escape from reality. I close my eyes, I play a live album by Sting, and I imagine the crowd's clapping for me. And it's like the drums are back to being what they were supposed to be and what they were originally, which is, hey, I'm going to go hit them, and I really don't care if I miss a note. I don't care if I rushed or dragged. I don't want to think like that right now. I've done enough homework for the day. As far as the business goes, it's, to me, instead of studying the past of business, it's about reinventing and pushing business into the future. I remember, thinking like, why is marketing, when I would study marketing, I was like, God, it's so blatantly marketing. There's got to be a more organic way to do this. Like, how do I just push something out to the world and say, okay, this on its own, it lives all on its own. Here's a video lesson. It's front to end. I'm not pushing anything. But if you like it more, or if you like it and you want more, then I'm going to let you ask for more. And then I can direct you somewhere. But it's not that crap where somebody has like, here's a lesson and I'm going to fade it out at 90 seconds and then say, for the rest of the video, visit my website. I never wanted to be that car salesman. I never wanted to be the sham wow guy trying to like have $19.99 flash at the screen at you. I just always wanted to be as organic as possible. What I've learned is that today in, I don't know my months, but whatever month it is in 2017, I just know that the biggest commodity in business is trust. And so you and I have talked about, like, let's say that you came to me and said, hey, can you make a quick video about your transition ride? I would actually have to go and look at my social media and say, honestly, no, Chris, I can't for another month because I've promoted 2 clinics in a row. So I've asked my followers to act twice in a row. I need to build up my credit. I'm in social media debt. I need to build up my social media credit. So let me do a couple free lessons. Let me give back to them, and then we can show them something that, that I'm asking them to at least take a look at or eventually purchase. So, and then the other thing is, if you came to me and said, hey, here's a product that's not selling very well. We know you don't play it on your kit, but can you, just so we can boost the sales? I mean, first of all, I know that you would never do that, but you know me well enough to know that I would just say no. It's like, no, that would lose me trust points. I can't lose trust, because if you lose trust, you never get it back. And so, and that's one of those things where even as a Gretsch artist, my students sometimes are like, man, I can't believe you told me to buy a Thomas Silverstar. And I'm like, why? It's a dope kit. You asked me what would work for that situation. My company doesn't make anything that would fit your situation, and at the price point that you're looking at, that's the best kit for you. Or a Yamaha stage custom. It doesn't matter, but I always steer my students towards what's best for them, because then I know if I do recommend, oh, you should get the 14-inch extra dry Byzance hats, they know he's not pushing Meinl. He really thinks that that's what's best for me. So.
Are there educators in another field, not drumming, any other field, that you've learned a lot from? If so, who are they and why?
Sure. I would say that drumming probably has the least amount of educators that I've learned things from as far as outside influences. My private teachers, for sure. Pete Magadini was the guy that really took me under his wing, and I studied everything. But after that, I would say that, it's all been astronomy and astrophysics. So probably the 2 Brians are the ones that have taught me the most. So Brian Greene is an American. I think he's a string theorist. And I remember him walking out to give a TED talk about string theory. And I'm thinking like, okay, this guy's about to give a TED talk about a subject that maybe 11 people on the planet truly understand. And he's going to try to tell the world how this goes down. And by the end, with just the right explanations, with the right comparisons, with the right analogies, the whole crowd was on board. And I'm sitting at home going like, okay, I'm not a string theorist, but I kind of get this. And I thought, okay, I need to watch this video 5 times a day, minimum. So that was one of them. The other one was Brian Greene. Brian Greene is he works at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, at the Large Hadron Collider. And when CERN first went online, I don't know if you remember this, but it was in the news, but when CERN first went online, within like the first week, they broke it. And this, $30 billion experiment was broke in the first week or so. And Brian Cox flew over to America to explain how they broke this $30 billion experiment. And I thought like, oh, this is going to be great.
Brian Cox or Brian Green?
Brian Cox.
So Brian Cox.
He's the UK guy.
He's the guy that works for CERN. Brian Green was the first guy you mentioned.
Yeah,
okay.
And he works, or he's a string theorist in America. So Brian Cox walks out on stage, and he's British, and I won't fake his accent because, one, I can't, and in my current voice state, I definitely can't. But he's like, all right, here we go. And within 3 minutes, everyone was totally cool with the failure of this $30 billion experiment. And I just thought, wow, what a cool customer that he had to go face the music, and he just disarmed everyone with just the way he walked on stage. He walked on stage confidently, but not cocky. He spoke to the room, but he didn't speak over the room. Everything about the way he delivered information, I just said, that's it. I want to do that for drumming. I want to stand on stage and let every drummer that's struggling playing a double stroke roll at 60 BPM know, hey, I've got your back. Like, you are exactly where I used to be. This is a journey, and we're on it together. And I also want to let the pro drummer guy that's in the crowd ready to tear me apart know, you can't shake me, man. Like, I'm not cocky. I just have confidence. I know that I can do this one thing very well. And I want to give the whole room that kind of confidence, like, okay, we're in good hands for the next 45 minutes. So yeah, Brian Green, as far as making the most impossible things tangible, I thought if he can do that with string theory, I can do that with drums. And then Brian Cox for being able to disarm a crowd and get them on his side in under 5 minutes.
In your line of work, is there anything that makes you nervous?
I would say that I have the same nerves that everyone does, so it's not like that ever goes away. But the one thing that has really helped me is just this simple saying that preparation equals relaxation. The more I prepare, the more I'm relaxed. The only time I'm nervous is when I'm underprepared, because I'm on a plane going to some random country to do some festival, and there's just a part of the human brain that knows, hey, man, you were screwing around. Like, you did not prepare for this. And if you think you're just going to show up and wing it, good luck. And that's when I get nervous. So I would say that situations don't make me nervous. It's just my preparation for them that can add to that. I definitely get the same butterflies that everyone gets right before I go on stage, but I've just gotten to that point where I trick myself into believing that those are excitement feelings, not nervousness. I've also learned to cool down instead of to hype up. There's a book called Crunch Time, and the book is it kind of follows relievers, so major league pitchers that are relievers. And so there's no more crunch time in the world of sports than having to come in to get one guy out in the bottom of the ninth. I mean, that's like the last ninth inning, reliever comes in to strike out one human being. And the whole game that's been going on for 4 hours is based off of the next 2 minutes. And so the whole book is from a coach that coaches these relievers. And what I learned about it was there's a moment where you can get yourself so pumped and so excited that your performance starts to dip and dip and dip. And the theory is if you can actually go backwards and calm yourself, listen to calming music and chill out, you'll be much more relaxed on stage. So I've been doing that a lot. The other thing, I took so much from Michael Jordan and the lessons that he learned from Phil Jackson. So being able to pre-visualize the moment. You guys got me on my first PASIC show, right? So when I went to PASIC, the first thing I did was ask to be let in the room that I was going to be performing in, or on the stage I was going to be performing on, and I took a panoramic picture from the stage of the crowd, or where the crowd would be sitting, and I took that to my hotel room for the next 2 days and just stared at it as I was falling asleep, pre-visualizing what I was going to see, pre-visualizing every moment. I pre-visualized myself walking up onto the stage. What happens if I trip? Okay, we make this joke. What happens if I drop a stick? We grab it from here. I went through everything that could ever happen. So when the moment came, there was nothing that could possibly happen that I hadn't already experienced in my mind. So yeah, I don't really get too nervous anymore just because of those techniques.
Last question for you.
Yes, sir.
Where do you see the future of online education, particularly in this instance, online education about drumming? Where do you see that headed?
Yeah, I think that we're going in a really healthy place right now. I think it's kind of shaken out right now where myself, I've kind of become the home for general education. If you want to learn how to play the drums, Mike'sLessons.com is one of the destinations for that. I feel like companies like Drumeo have become the destination for online clinics. I want to see my favorite drummer play something, and I also want to hear them speak about it and explain it. I think Drumeo has done that extremely well, and it's a really cool service they provide. And then what I think is you've got general education taken care of and online clinics with famous drummers taken care of. Then what happens is, because technology has come so far, now I think we're going to get the chance to study with all of our favorite drummers and find out what makes them them. And that's something that doesn't threaten my business at all. If you want to know how Will Kennedy plays 6/8, don't ask me, ask Will. He's not dead. I don't want to teach you how Matt Garska plays a fill. He's alive. Go ask Matt Garska.
And how do you reach out to Will Kennedy and ask him this?
Well, he's actually, we've been working on his website together. So yeah, and it's funny, I actually started online drum lessons because I wanted Dave Weckl and Vinny Caliuta to do it, and they, obviously they weren't. We were still in the time of DVDs, and now Dave Weckl's got an online lesson website, and I love that stuff. I don't think that threatens me at all, because my job is to teach you how to play drums. Their job is to show you their artistic impression of what I've already taught you. So my thought is this: to boil it down, I'll teach you the paradiddle. JP Bouvet will show you how to make it cool. Something like that. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Or how he puts his spin on it. It's like, that's the thing is, when I was young, I didn't know that we all had access to the same information. I thought Thomas Lang had some secret book that I didn't have access to. But to find out that he's using the same exact rudiments that I am, he just put so much time into them, he's doing things with them that I can't do. It's like, oh, okay, that's still the same building blocks that I have access to. So my job is to give everyone in the world those building blocks and to get them going and moving. It's like, here is the core of what makes drumming, what it is. Now go find out how, Chris Coleman interprets that, and how does Brian Blade interpret that, and Mark Juliana, and Sput. So yeah, so that's where I see us going, is that instead of having a massive website like mikeslessons.com that's so all-encompassing with education, I just see every drummer in the world eventually having their page of lessons that kind of breaks down a little bit of what they do and how they interpret the world.
Very cool. Mike, thank you so much for taking all the time to come all the way out to Nashville to film all the videos, to do the live stream, to do the podcast. I can't thank you enough.
It was a blast, man. This was a fun day.
Yeah.
You and I have been... I remember our very first conversation in the driveway of my house, and just to see all the things that you and I have got to do together, and the countries we've visited and the trips we've gone on, it's just been a blast, man. So thanks for, honestly, thanks for being part of what Norbert said on day one. We get what you do. That sentence will never go away for me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Meinl Radio. If you liked this episode, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We would appreciate it very much. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.